Don't ask me to read this on the channel, guys. Don't ask, because I'm not gonna do it, because this book is very adult, right off the bat. So I will not be reading this on the channel. And this does not make a good book for children. Let me just tell you, do not get this for your kids. But here's a fun fact that not all of you might know. The witch from The Wizard of Oz, the Green Witch, who becomes the main character of Wicked by Gregory Maguire. Her name is Elphaba. If you saw the movie or you've seen the musical, you'll know. Her name is Elphaba, and Gregory Maguire named her Elphaba after L. Frank Baum. Elphaba. Did you know that? I'll show you my copy of Wicked though. This is like, so I know they're re-releasing it because of the film, the musical film, but I have like an old musical copy. This is the Broadway poster, and in the middle of my copy there are pictures of the musical, of like the production, and it's struggling to focus. Adina Menzel, Kristen Chenoweth, Carol Shelley. I've actually seen her in a show. We've got Dr. Dillamond, Fierro. This is the original cast. So that's the Norbert Leo Butts. And I don't know Dr. Dillamond. I mean, it says down there, but I don't actually like know it the way I know the rest of the cast. Joel Grey as the wizard. There's One Short Day. And there's, oh my gosh, there's a talking cat here. There's Nessa Rose. And this looks like For Good. If you haven't seen the show and you've only seen them filmed, then the rest of it is kind of spoilers. Well, here's Defying Gravity as it is in the show. So I thought some of you might enjoy seeing that little look at my copy of Wicked. But now we're might as well be in the thick jungles where we were born, as trying to protect Ozma when she needs no protection, and I'm dreadfully hungry all the time. You have enough to eat, I'm sure, said the lion, swaying his tail slowly back and forth. Enough, perhaps, but not the kind of food I long for, answered the tiger. What I'm hungry for is fat babies. I have a great desire to eat a few fat babies. Then perhaps the people of Oz would fear me, and I'd become more important. True, agreed the lion. It would stir up quite a rumpus if you ate but one fat baby. As for myself, my claws are sharp as needles and strong as crowbars, while my teeth are powerful enough to tear a person to pieces in a few seconds. I'm going to show you this illustration of the lion yawning. I think it's the lion, yeah. If I should spring upon a man and make chop suey of him, there would be wild excitement in the Emerald City, and the people would fall upon their knees and beg me for mercy. That, in my opinion, would render me of considerable importance. After you had torn the person to pieces, what would you do next? Asked the tiger sleepily. Then I would roar so loudly it would shake the earth, and stalk away to the jungle to hide myself before anyone could attack me or kill me for what I had done. I see, nodded the tiger. You are really cowardly. To be sure. That is why I am named the Cowardly Lion. That is why I have always been so tame and peaceable. But I'm awfully tired of being tame, added the lion with a sigh. And it would be fun to raise a row and show people what a terrible beast I really am. The tiger remained silent for several minutes, thinking deeply as he slowly washed his face with his left paw. Then he said, I'm getting old, and it would please me to eat at least one fat baby before I die. Suppose we surprise these people of Oz and prove our power. What do you say? We will walk out of here just as usual, and the first baby we meet I'll eat in a jiffy, and the first man or woman you meet you will tear to pieces. Then we will both run out of the city gates and gallop across the country and hide in the jungle before anyone can stop us. There they are, going off. Alright, I'm game, said the lion, yawning again so that he showed 2 rows of dreadfully sharp teeth. The tiger got up and stretched his great sleek body. Come on, he said. The lion stood up and proved he was the larger of the 2, for he was almost as big as a small horse. Out of the palace they walked, and met no one. They passed through the beautiful grounds, past fountains and beds of lovely flowers, and met no one. Then they unlatched a gate and entered a street of the city, and met no one. I wonder how a fat baby will taste, remarked the tiger as they stalked majestically along side by side. I imagine it will taste like nutmegs, said the lion. No, said the tiger. I have an idea it will taste like gumdrops. They turned a corner a side street, but met no one. Suddenly they heard a child crying. "Aha!" exclaimed the tiger. "There is my meat." He rushed around a corner, the lion following, and came upon a nice fat baby sitting in the middle of the street and crying as if in great distress. That must be the illustration we just saw. "What's the matter?" asked the tiger, crouching before the baby. I lost my mama," wailed the baby. "Why, you poor little thing," said the great beast, softly stroking the child's head with its paw. "Don't cry, my dear, for Mama can't be far away, and I'll help you find her." "Go on," said the lion who stood by. "Go on where?" asked the tiger, looking up. "Go and eat your fat baby." "Why, you dreadful creature," said the tiger reproachfully. "Would you want me to eat a poor little lost baby that don't know where its mother is?" And the beast gathered the little one into its strong, hairy arms and tried to comfort it by rocking it gently back and forth. Kind of terrifying looking. The lion growled low in its throat and seemed very much disappointed, but at that moment a scream reached their ears, and a woman came bounding out of a house and into the street. Seeing her baby in the embrace of the monster tiger, the woman screamed again and rushed forward to rescue it. But in her haste, she caught her foot in her skirt and tumbled head over heels and heels over head, stopping with such a bump that she saw many stars in the heavens, although it was broad daylight. And there she lay in a helpless manner, all tangled up and unable to stir. With one bound and a roar like a thunder, the huge lion was beside her. With his strong jaws he grasped her dress and raised her in an upright position. "Poor thing, are you hurt?" he gently asked. Gasping for breath, the woman struggled to free herself and tried to walk, but she limped badly and tumbled down again. "My baby," she said pleadingly. "The baby is all right, don't worry," replied the lion. And then he added, "Keep quiet now, and I'll carry you back to your house, and the hungry tiger will carry your baby." The tiger, which had approached the place with the child in its arms, asked in astonishment, "Aren't you going to tear her into 60 pieces?" "No, nor into 6 pieces," answered the lion indignantly. There's another illustration that looks quite messed up here. Look. See, it's like weirdly doubled, I guess. However they printed the illustrations, they didn't do a great job. I knocked my light over. Oh well. "No, nor into 6 pieces," answered the lion indignantly. "I'm not such a brute as to destroy a poor woman who has hurt herself trying to save her lost baby. If you're so ferocious and cruel and bloodthirsty, you may leave me and go away, for I do not wish to associate with you." "That's all right," answered the tiger. "I'm not cruel, not in the least. I'm only hungry, but I thought you were cruel." "Thank heaven I'm respectable," said the lion with dignity. He then raised the woman and with much gentleness carried her into the house, where he laid her upon a sofa. The tiger followed with the baby, which he safely deposited beside its mother. The little one liked the hungry tiger, and grasping the enormous beast by both ears, the baby kissed the beast's nose to show he was grateful and very happy. "Thank you very much," said the woman. "I've often heard what good beasts you are, in spite of your power to do mischief to mankind, and now I think that the stories are true. I do not think either of you have ever had an evil thought." The hungry tiger and the cowardly lion hung their heads and did not look into each other's eyes, for both were shamed and humbled. They crept away and stalked back through the streets until they again entered the palace grounds, where they retreated to the pretty, comfortable rooms they occupied at the back of the palace. There they silently lost myself up this afternoon by hurting that poor mother." The tiger looked at him steadily and then yawned a wide yawn. "You're a coward," he remarked. "Well," said the lion, "it's better to be a coward than to do wrong." "To be sure," answered the other, "and that reminds me that I nearly lost my own reputation, for had I eaten that fat baby, I would not now be the hungry tiger. It's better to go hungry, seems to me, than to be cruel to a little child." And then they dropped their heads on their paws and went to sleep. What did you think of that first little story? It was quite interesting, wasn't it? I haven't read it, so I wasn't expecting them to want to eat a child. Quite interesting. But the parable, the moral of the story, is very heavy-handed at the end, repeating it back, but then this is for children. What did you think of the language? Did you think that it was written in a way for children? I thought it was quite interesting. Occasionally there were words used that I feel I would not often see in a children's book, like the word, what was the word that made me think that? Let me go back to the beginning. It was in the beginning. Ornamental. Yeah, I do think that most children wouldn't be familiar with the word ornamental. Ornament maybe, so then they can grasp the term ornamental, but that's not something you often read in a kid's book. Okay, the next story, it's got some familiar names. It's called Little Dorothy and Toto. Little Dorothy and Toto. Dorothy was a little Kansas girl who once accidentally found the beautiful land of Oz and was invited to live there always. Toto was Dorothy's small black dog with fuzzy, curly hair and bright black eyes. Together, when they tired of the grandeur of the Emerald City of Oz, they would wander out into the country and all through the land, peering into queer nooks and corners and having a good time in their own simple way. There was a little wizard living in Oz who was a faithful friend of Dorothy and did not approve of her traveling alone in this way. But the girl always laughed at the little man's fears for her and said she was not afraid of anything that might happen. One day, while on such a journey, Dorothy and Toto found themselves among the wild wooded hills at the southeast of Oz, a place usually avoided by travelers because there were so many magical things abounded there. And as they entered a forest path, the little girl noticed a sign tacked to a tree which said, "Look out for Crinkling." That's this sign here. Look out for Crinkling. Toto could not talk, as many of the animals of Oz can, for he was just a common Kansas dog. There's another illustration here. The illustrations kind of seem to just pop up whenever, and they don't seem to be particularly appropriately placed. Is this the wizard, or is this Crinkling? I don't know. We don't know yet. For he was just a common Kansas dog. But he looked at the sign so seriously that Dorothy almost believed he could read it, and she knew quite well that Toto understood every word she said to him. "Never mind, Crinkling," said she. "I don't believe anything in Oz will try to hurt us, Toto. But if I get into trouble, you must take care of me." "Bow wow," said Toto, and Dorothy knew that meant a promise. The path was narrow and wound here and there between the trees, but they could not lose their way because thick vines and creepers shut them in on both sides. They had walked a long time when suddenly, turning a curve on the pathway, they came upon a lake of black water, so big and so deep that they were forced to stop. "Well, Toto," said Dorothy, looking at the lake, "we must turn back, I guess, for there's neither a bridge nor a boat to take us across the black water." "Here's the ferryman, though," cried a tiny voice beside them, and the girl gave a start and looked down at her feet, where a man no taller than 3 inches sat at the edge of the path with his legs dangling over the lake. You see the little merely repeated, "I'm the ferryman, and it's my business to carry people across the lake." Dorothy couldn't help feeling surprised, for she could have picked the little man up with one hand, and the lake was big and broad. Looking at the ferryman more closely, she saw he had small eyes, a big nose, and a sharp chin. His hair was blue, and his clothes scarlet, and Dorothy noticed that every button on his jacket was the head of some animal. The top button was a bear's head, and the next button a wolf's head. The next was a cat's head, and the next a weasel's head, while the last button of all was the head of a field mouse. When Dorothy looked into the eyes of these animals' heads, they all nodded and said in a chorus, "Don't believe all you hear, little girl." "Silence," said the small ferryman, slapping each button head in turn, but not hard enough to hurt them. Then he turned to Dorothy and asked, "Do you wish to cross over the lake?" "Why, I'd like to," she answered, hesitating, "but I can't see how you'll manage to carry us without any boat." "If you can't see, you mustn't see," he answered with a laugh. "All you need to do is shut your eyes, say the word, and over you go." Not really sure the relevance of this drawing yet. It's that same guy. Dorothy wanted to get across in order that she might continue her journey. "All right," she said, closing her eyes. "I'm ready." Instantly she was seized in a pair of strong arms so big and powerful that she was startled and cried out in fear. "Silence!" roared a great voice, and the girl opened her eyes to find that the tiny man had suddenly grown to a giant and was holding both her and Toto in a tight embrace, while in one step he spanned the lake and reached the other shore. Dorothy became frightened then, especially as the giant did not stop, but continued tramping in great steps over the wooded hills, crushing bushes and trees beneath his broad feet. She struggled in vain to free herself, while Toto whined and trembled beside her, for the little dog was frightened too. "Stop!" screamed the girl. "Let me down!" But the giant paid no attention. "Who are you, and where are you taking me?" she continued, but the giant said not a word. Close to Dorothy's ear, however, a voice answered her, saying, "This is the terrible Crinklink, and he has you in his power." Dorothy managed to twist her head around and found it was the second button on the jacket, the wolf's head, which had spoken to her. "What will Crinklink do with me?" she asked anxiously. Dorothy and Toto. "No one knows. You must wait and see," replied the wolf. "Some of his captives he whips," squeaked the weasel's head. "Some he transforms into bugs and other things," growled the bear's head. "Some he enchants so that they become doorknobs," sighed the cat's head. "Some he makes his slaves, even as we are, and that is the most dreadful fate of all," added the field mouse. "As long as Crinklink exists, we shall remain buttons, but as there are no more buttonholes on his jacket, he will probably make you a slave." Dorothy began to wish she had not met Crinklink. Meantime, the giant took such big steps that he soon reached the heart of the hills, where perched upon the highest peak stood a log castle. Before this castle, he paused to set down Dorothy and Toto, for Crinklink was at present far too large to enter his own doorway, so he made himself grow smaller until he was about the size of an ordinary man. Then he said to Dorothy in stern, commanding tones, "Enter, girl." Dorothy obeyed and entered the castle with Toto at her heels. She found the place to be merely one big room. There was a table and chair of ordinary size near the center, and at one side a wee bed that seemed scarcely big enough for a doll. Everywhere else were dishes, 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 dishes. They were all soiled and were piled upon the floor, in all corners and upon every shelf. Evidently, Crinklink hadn't washed a dish for years, but cast them aside as he used them. Dorothy's captor sat down in the chair and frowned at her. "You are young and strong, and will make a good dishwasher," said he. "Do you mean me to wash all these dishes?" she asked, feeling both indignant and fearful, for such a task would take weeks to accomplish. "That's just what I mean," he retorted. "I need clean dishes, for all I have are soiled, and you're gonna make them clean or get trounced. So get to work and be careful not to break anything. If you smash a dish, the penalty is 1 lash for my dreadful cat o' nine tails for every piece the dish breaks into." And here, Crinkling displayed a terrible whip that made the little girl shudder. Dorothy knew how to wash dishes, but she remembered that often she carelessly broke one. In this case, however, a good deal depended on being careful, so she handled the dishes very cautiously. He looks quite different than like he did in the other illustrations. While she worked, Toto sat by the hearth and growled low at Crinkling, and Crinkling sat in his chair and growled at Dorothy because she moved so slowly. He expected her to break a dish any minute, but as the hours passed away, and this did not happen, Crinkling began to grow sleepy. It was tiresome watching the girl wash dishes, and often he glanced longingly at the tiny bed. Now he began to yawn, and he yawned and he yawned until he finally said, "I'm going to take a nap, but the buttons on my jacket will be wide awake, and whenever you break a dish, the crash will waken me. As I'm rather sleepy, I hope you won't interrupt my nap by breaking anything for a long time." Then Crinkling made himself grow smaller and smaller until he was 3 inches high and of a size to fit the tiny bed, and once he lay down and fell fast asleep. Dorothy came close to the buttons and whispered, "Would you really warn Crinkling if I tried to escape?" "You can't escape," growled the bear. "Crinkling would become a giant and soon overtake you." "But you might kill him while he sleeps," suggested the cat in a soft voice. "Oh," cried Dorothy, drawing back. "I couldn't possibly kill anything, even to save my life." But Toto had heard this conversation and was not so particular about killing monsters, as also the little dog knew he must try to save his mistress. In an instant he sprang upon the wee bed and was about to seize the sleeping Crinkling in his jaws, when Dorothy heard a loud crash and a heap of dishes fell from the table to the floor. Then the girl saw Toto and the little man rolling on the floor together like a fuzzy ball, and when the ball stopped rolling, behold, there was Toto wagging his tail joyfully, and there sat the little Wizard of Oz, laughing merrily at the expression of surprise on Dorothy's face. "Yes, my dear, it's me," said he, "and I've been playing tricks on you for your own good. I wanted to prove to you that it is really dangerous for a little girl to wander alone in fairy country, so I took the form of Crinkling to teach you a lesson. There isn't any Crinkling, to be sure, but if there had been, you'd be severely whipped for breaking all those dishes." The wizard now rose, took off the coat with the button heads, and spread it on the floor, wrong side up. At once there crept from beneath it a bear, a wolf, a cat, a weasel, and a field mouse, who all rushed from the room and escaped into the mountains. "Come on, Toto," said Dorothy. "Let's go back to the Emerald City. You've given me a good scare, wizard," she added with dignity, "and perhaps I'll forgive you by and by, but just now I'm mad to think how easily you fooled me." So what did you think of that story? That one, once again, the parable for children here. Very heavy-handed. I mean, don't go out on your own, or else you might be forced to wash dishes and be whipped. Pretty dark. So, I want to point out that the next story has a fascinating word that I think has more of a modern day connotation. But clearly, here's this book from 1913 with a name you might find familiar. TikTok and the Gnome King. Did you know that TikTok is not a modern day thing, but clearly a very, very old story? I guess we'll have to find out who TikTok is. I mean, it's spelled the exact same way too, which I find really funny. And the Gnome King. in a way that rendered him very disagreeable. It so happened that on this unfortunate day, Tick-Tock, the clockwork man, visited the Gnome King to ask a favor. Tick-Tock lived in the land of Oz, and although he was an active and important person, he was made entirely of metal. Machinery within him, something like the works of a clock, made him move. Other machinery made him talk. Still other machinery made him think. Although so cleverly constructed, the clockwork man was far from perfect. 3 separate keys wound up his motion machinery, his speech works, and his thoughts. One or more of these contrivances was likely to run down at a critical moment, leaving poor Tick-Tock helpless. Also, some of his parts were wearing out through much use, and just now his thought machinery needed repair. The skillful little wizard of Oz, had tinkered of Tick-Tock's thoughts without being able to get them properly regulated, so he advised the clockwork man to go to the Gnome King and secure a new set of springs, which would render his thoughts more elastic and responsive. I really don't know what's happening here. Again, the illustrations seem to just be randomly sort of placed. Be careful what you say to the Gnome King, warned the wizard. He has a bad temper, and the least little thing makes him angry. Tick-Tock promised, and the wizard wound his machinery and set him walking in the direction of the Gnome King's dominions, just across from the desert, from the land of Oz. He ran down just as he reached the entrance to the underground palace. And there, Kaliko, the Gnome King's chief steward, found him and wound him up again. I want to see the king, said Tick-Tock in his jerky voice. Well, remarked Kaliko, it may be safe for a cast-iron person like you to face his majesty this morning, but you must announce yourself, for should I show my face inside the jewel-studded cavern where the king is now raving, I'd soon look like a dish of mashed potatoes, and be of no further use to anyone. I'm not afraid, said Tick-Tock. Then walk in and make yourself at home, answered Kaliko, and threw open the door of the king's cavern. Tick-Tock is rather round, is he not? It's kind of a big ball of metal, and this must be Kaliko. He's just like a snowman made of metal. 2 round spheres. Tick-Tock promptly walked in and faced the astonished Gnome King, to whom he said, "Good morning. I want 2 new steel springs for my thought works and a new cogwheel for my speech producer. How about it, your majesty?" The Gnome King growled a menacing growl, and his eyes were red with rage. "How dare you enter my presence?" he shouted. "I dare anything," said Tick-Tock. "I'm not afraid of a fat gnome." This was true, yet an unwise speech. Had Tick-Tock's thoughts been in good working order, he would have said something else. The angry Gnome King quickly caught up his heavy mace and hurled it straight at Tick-Tock. When it struck the metal man's breast, the force of the blow burst the bolts which held the plates of his body together, and they clattered to the floor in a score of pieces. No, oh no, Tick-Tock. Our guy. Hundreds and hundreds of wheels, pins, cogs, and springs filled the air like a cloud and then rattled like hail upon the floor. Where Tick-Tock had stood was now only a scrap heap, and the Gnome King was so amazed by the terrible effect of his blow that he stared in wonder. His Majesty's anger quickly cooled. He remembered that the clockwork man was a favorite subject of the powerful Princess Ozma of Oz, who would be sure to resent Tick-Tock's ruin. Too bad, he hears of this, and the chances are you will lose your throne and your kingdom." The Gnome King turned pale, for he loved to rule the gnomes, and did not know of any other way to earn a living in case Ozma fought and conquered him. Do you think Ozma will be angry?" he asked anxiously. "I'm sure of it," said Kaliko, "and she has the right to be. You've made scrap iron of her favorite." The king groaned. "Sweep him up and throw the rubbish into the black pit," he commanded, and then he shut himself up in his private den, and for days would see no one, because he was so ashamed of his unreasoning anger, and so feared the results of his rash act. Kaliko swept up the pieces, but he did not throw them into the black pit. Being a clever and skillful mechanic, he determined to fit the pieces together again. Here's Kaliko wandering over the ruins of TikTok. No man ever faced a greater puzzle, but it was interesting work, and Kaliko succeeded. When he found a spring or wheel worn or imperfect, he made a new one. Within 2 weeks, by working steadily day and night, the chief steward completed his task and put the 3 sets of clockworks and the last rivet into TikTok's body. He then wound up the motion machinery, and the clockwork man walked up and down the room as naturally as ever. Then Kaliko wound up the thoughtworks and the speech regulator and said to TikTok, "How do you feel now?" "Fine," said the clockwork man. "You have done a very good job, Kaliko, and saved me from destruction. Much obliged." "Don't mention it," replied the chief steward. "I quite enjoyed the work." Just then, the Gnome King's gong sounded, and Kaliko rushed away through the jewel-studded cavern and into the den, where the king had hidden, leaving the doors ajar. "Kaliko," said the king in a meek voice, "I've been shut up here long enough to repent bitterly the destruction of TikTok. Of course, Ozma will have revenge and send an army to fight us, but we must take our medicine. One thing comforts me. TikTok wasn't really a live person, he was only a machine man, and so it wasn't very wicked to stop his clockworks. I couldn't sleep nights at first for worry, but there's no more harm in smashing a machine man than in breaking a wax doll. Don't you think so?" "I am too humble to think in the presence of your majesty," said Kaliko. Here's Gnome King and TikTok, although they're not quite together at the moment. "Then get me something to eat," commanded the king, "for I'm nearly starved. 2 roasted goats, a barrel of cakes, and 9 mince pies will do me until dinner time." Kaliko bowed and hurried away to the royal kitchen, forgetting TikTok, who was wandering around in the outer cavern. Suddenly the Gnome King looked up, "Excuse me," said the Gnome King, and then he went to his treasure chamber to get the jewels for Princess Ozma of Oz. Those must have been jewels in that picture. It looked like a bunch of springs. Oh no, I suppose they are jewels. Sorry, my dog just burped. You want to see up close? There we go. Those are the jewels and TikTok's round body. So, once again, the moral of this one, very obvious. Don't get too angry, or you'll do something that you might sorely regret. So that was half of the stories. I guess it's slightly longer of a book than I thought. Some of these look like thick pages, but they're actually multiple pages. It has quite an old book smell, you know what I mean? Like, kind of musty. So I'm just gonna quickly read about this book, because like I said, I wasn't totally sure. So I'm gonna go to Wikipedia. This is a set of 6 short stories written for young children by L. Frank Baum, the creator of the Oz books. They were first published in separate small booklets in 1913, and then the collected edition in 1914. So this is the 1914 collection edition with illustrations by John R. Neal. And this was issued to promote the new Oz novel, The Patchwork Girl of Oz. Each booklet is 29 pages long and printed in blue ink rather than black. I did notice it's blue, but it's interesting that each booklet is the exact same length. So, they were part of a project by Baum and his publisher to revitalize and continue the series of Oz books that he had written up to that date. So the list of Oz books starts with The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which was published in the year 1900. Then The Marvelous Land of Oz, which was published in 1904. Then Ozma of Oz in 1907. Then Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz in 1908. Then The Road to Oz in 1909. The Emerald City of Oz in 1910. The Patchwork Girl of Oz in 1913. TikTok of Oz in 1914. TikTok gets his own book, and was a stage musical, I guess. So yeah, TikTok actually has quite like a long history. Oh, there's so many of them. Then there's The Scarecrow of Oz, Rink Dink in Oz, The Lost Princess of Oz, The Tin Woodman of Oz, The Magic of Oz, and Glinda of Oz. But then there's the story compilations and other works, including this one in 1913. So, wow. He apparently attempted to end the Oz series with his 6th book, The Emerald City of Oz, because in the final chapter of that book, he sealed off the land of Oz from the outside world. And then he began a new series of books, The Sea Fairies and Sky Island. But by 1911, it looks like he went bankrupt. So, in order to combat his bankruptcy, he started increasing his literary output, and he put out a lot of books around that time. And none of his other series were as successful as like his Oz books, so maybe that's why he did this one. Yeah, so disappointing sales through 1911 and 1912 convinced him and his publisher that a return to Oz was needed. So he wrote The Patchwork Girl of Oz for a 1913 release. And in the same year, his publisher issued the 6 Little Wizard stories in individual booklets at a cost of 15 cents each. So they were, let's look up what that would cost today, shall we? Let's see. I'm gonna look up an inflation calculator. So it actually would be 1913, which is actually the earliest year available. If it was purchased for, what did I say? how much the whole work, I mean, would it be 15 cents times 6, or do you think it was a little bit cheaper to get them all together? The goal was to reach the youngest beginning readers and create in them an interest in the larger Oz canon. That makes a lot of sense. So these are even younger than the Wizard of Oz, and the Wonderful World of Oz, whatever works. So he was trying to get those young readers interested in his other things. So that's really interesting. I was just kind of curious how much, it sort of sells for today. Looks like you can get it. I see some on eBay, $40. That seems expensive. There's an illustrated first edition on Amazon for $6.95. But it says 100th anniversary, so actually it's a much newer book. This is an illustrated edition of a classic in the Wizard of Oz collection. Yeah, so this is from 2020, and it's only $6. Yeah. People are rating this really poorly for some reason. Anyway, it doesn't seem like it's appreciated a whole lot, but I hope you enjoyed kind of a step back in time with a really old book. And if you want me to finish the works with the last 3 stories, I can do so, as we don't really need to fear copyright here anymore, as it's over 100 years old. At least I think that's how it works. I'm pretty sure. It is quite old. Also, if you're interested in seeing my other antique books, I'd be happy to do kind of like a show and tell. Or I could just read some of them. I imagine quite a lot of them are old enough to safely read. I don't know that they're all over 100 years old, but I definitely think some are from that time period or earlier, or a little later. 1925, wow. Anyway, I like old books, and I hope you do too. I think it's always interesting to see how language changes, meaning changes. Again, I don't think that this really would pass as kids' books anymore. I think maybe the language is too antiquated for modern children. But I don't have kids, so I don't actually know. I just think that I wouldn't have read this to my preschoolers. I don't think they would have enjoyed it or understood a lot of the words. And then the last story, they would have just laughed at the name TikTok and not been able to get past the fact that his name is TikTok. I do think that's really funny. So, this was